One of the things that I'm most passionate about, as someone who speaks out on the issues men and boys face in today's society, is helping others to realize that change is going to take time. And if we don't step up and do something as men, as fathers, and as grandfathers, it's our sons and grandsons who are going to pay the price. We live in a world that's rapidly evolving, but one thing remains clear. How we raise boys will shape the future every bit as much as it has the past. While there's been tremendous growth and focus on improving the way we raise girls and how we teach them to think about themselves, the same cannot be said for boys. In fact, I would argue not only hasn't there been any growth, if anything, it's that things have regressed. Regressed in how we view boys and teach them what it means to be a man. For decades now, boys have been taught that being manly means suppressing your emotions, always being tough and avoiding anything that could be perceived as making them weak. They've been told that they are to blame for all of society's problems, that they are directly responsible for events and things that occurred hundreds, even thousands of years ago, and thus they need to take responsibility for those things and feel ashamed of them and themselves in the process. For decades now, we've taught boys that there is something inherently wrong with them simply because they're boys. And it's largely led us to where we are now as a society. A society boys and young men are withdrawing from in ever-increasing numbers because they feel unneeded and unwanted. This has been compounded with the rise of single motherhood and the removal of men in the teaching profession. It's not uncommon now for boys to grow up with little, even no interaction with men whatsoever, and thus they are never taught by men what it means to be a man. Instead, their mothers try to fill that role, a role they honestly can never fill properly. Often they add to it their expectations that their son is now the man of the house, thus placing a burden on him even as young as 5 or 6, when they have absolutely no comprehension of what that means, let alone how to do it. These mothers instead impart what they consider to be their ideal of what it means to be a man, which more often than not is merely to try and teach them how to be more like the ideal woman. Which is why we see time and again that these women who have installed those values onto their son are the very same ones that are saying today's men are weak, unmanly, and unworthy. These are the same women who are rejecting men because they fit the very ideal that they've been instilling in their sons. It's a no-win situation for boys and men, and one that has led to them not understanding what it means to be a man. Yet rather than acknowledge that and take steps to address it, society has doubled down on the messaging we're giving to boys, essentially saying that they need to be what they've always been: providers, protectors, and disposable. For all the gains we've made in helping girls to move forward, when it comes to boys, we're still stuck in the 1950s. And we need to ask ourselves, why? Why do we continue passing down the same message generation after generation to boys? Why aren't we putting as much value on boys' lives, boys' education, and boys' well-being that we do girls? Why aren't we investing the time, funding, and effort to teach these boys how to be men anywhere near that to the level and effort we spend as a society to teach girls what it means to be a woman? Why aren't we as a society showing boys what healthy masculinity looks like in today's modern world? And why aren't we teaching them how to cope better in the face of a society that largely hates them for what they are? Boys. The fact of the matter is, society depends on us addressing these issues. It simply will not survive unless we start addressing these issues, not in the future, but right now. Research shows that traditional notions of masculinity can, and often do, contribute to negative outcomes for men. In fact, it's a large reason why women outlive men by 5 to 7 years. For example, boys who are raised to suppress their emotions are more likely to struggle with physical and mental health issues later in life. It's also a large reason why so many young men are choosing to unalive themselves, turning to alcohol and drugs, or at best withdrawing from society completely. Yet there is little to no discussion on the matter, let alone any focus on teaching boys to embrace their full range of emotions, and that it's okay for them to express vulnerability. So how do we break the cycle and mindset that masculinity is toxic and promote a positive, modern version of what manhood is? Well, it starts to coming to grips with the reality that fathers are absolutely crucial to the development of boys and teaching them what it means to be a man. It means acknowledging that the automatic placement of the children with the mother in divorce situations, which has been the paradigm for over 50 years now, has largely failed, especially with regard to boys. It's us as a society accepting and admitting that mothers, no matter how good they are or how hard they try, simply aren't capable of taking on the role of fathers and teaching what only a father can teach, any more than fathers can teach daughters what mothers teach them. It's not disparaging to either gender to say that. It's acknowledging the reality that men and women parent differently and that each has unique things to offer and teach to children. Along those lines, there are other things we need to be teaching boys, starting with the most important of all, that they are worthy, aren't a burden on society, and that they're anything but disposable. For millennia now, we have viewed men and boys as cannon fodder, both literally and figuratively. The mindset being that it's better for the human species to prioritize the lives of women and girls over that of men and boys. Now, to be fair, initially, that might have been needed in order for our species to survive, as women can only produce one offspring per year, while a man, in theory, could produce millions. But the reality is, that no longer holds sway in a world of 8 billion human beings. We are long past the days of going extinct, and that mindset needs to go with it. Society needs to start seeing boys every bit as valuable as girls, not something to be viewed as lesser or to be blamed for all the ills of society. Things that are drilled into boys literally from birth. We also need to teach boys that it's okay to cry or to express themselves, to not bottle things up. Boys need to know that expressing emotions isn't a sign of weakness, but in fact a sign of strength. We need to show them healthy ways to express their feelings instead of expecting them to just deal with it or bury them deep. We need to teach them that respect and kindness are key things, but that it's a two-way street. Just like being a man isn't about dominance or control, neither should being a woman. It's about leading with empathy, compassion, and respect for everyone, and expecting the very same in return, especially from women. We should also be encouraging boys to challenge gender norms just as we do girls. The message to girls for decades has been, you can do anything you set your mind to. But for boys, well, not so much. Instead, the messaging we've instilled in boys is that you are defined not by who you are or what you do as a human being, but how much money you make. Not just now, but in the future. We teach boys the mindset that no matter how successful you are, it's not good enough. We teach them that they should continually sacrifice themselves, their health, even their lives in the pursuit of more. And that's a huge mistake. Instead, we should be teaching boys that they should feel free to explore interests, behaviors, and careers that they enjoy and find fulfilling. The very same thing we've been teaching girls for decades now. We need to stop telling boys that certain careers aren't masculine or aren't likely to provide an income at a level that would define them as a good provider. We need to open up a dialogue with boys and teach them healthy communication. But we also need to stop trying to force boys to be more like girls in the way they communicate. Instead, we need to accept that the problem is ours, not theirs, and thus it's on us to change ourselves and the way we communicate with these boys to a manner that works for them, not the other way around. We also need to teach boys how to communicate openly and honestly with their peers, friends, and family members without being viewed as weak or having to live in fear of judgment or ridicule for what they say. It's long past time that we stop disregarding the needs of boys or downplaying them in the pursuit of so-called equality. Equality, which has been entirely focused on helping girls and has completely ignored boys.